Speaker Johnson is protecting pedophiles. That's what this is all about. The only reason Adelita Grijalva is not being sworn in right now is because he wants to protect whatever is in those files, all the pedophiles that would be revealed, and he wants to make sure every day that that doesn't happen, he has one more day to protect all those pedophiles, whether it's involving Donald Trump or any of his rich elite friends. That is what Speaker Johnson is doing here. Every reason that he has ever come up with has changed from day one, day two, day three. The only thing that's been consistent the whole time is that Speaker Johnson is trying to cover up for pedophiles. Is that clear enough? Speaker Johnson is covering up for pedophiles, and in the process, Arizona does not have a congresswoman. Right now, of all the times when we have flooding, do you know how often Arizona gets rain, let alone floods? In Tucson, in her district, those members do not have someone to call to ask for help because Speaker Johnson is covering up for pedophiles. Do you guys get that? Speaker Johnson is covering up for pedophiles. Thank you.
Hello, people. Adam is here. So what is happening right now? Mike Johnson chose to keep the Epstein documents buried. And now a federal lawsuit is going to force him to explain that choice under oath, in open court, with the full weight of the law behind it. This is the moment everything changes. Because what started as another example of Washington dysfunction, another procedural stalemate that most people would ignore, has just exploded into a full-blown constitutional crisis. Arizona Democrats and transparency advocates have filed a lawsuit against Johnson that doesn't just accuse him of playing political games. It accuses him of intentionally and deliberately disenfranchising tens of thousands of American voters. It accuses him of manipulating the machinery of Congress to prevent a duly elected representative from taking her seat. And it accuses him of doing all of this for one reason and one reason only, to make absolutely certain that the Jeffrey Epstein files never see the light of day.
Yeah, and at the same time, we know Senate Democrats are putting the pressure on the Republican Party to swear in Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva from Arizona. But Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries threatened legal action if she's not sworn in today. Here's what he said.
But it's shameful that she has not been sworn in because Speaker Johnson and House Republicans apparently want to continue to hide the Jeffrey Epstein files from the American people. This has gone on now for weeks. And so it's my expectation that if she is not sworn in today, during the pro forma session today, as the Arizona Attorney General has made clear, expect swift and decisive legal action.
Let that sink in for a moment. The Speaker of the House of Representatives, the man second in line to the presidency, is being dragged into federal court over allegations that he is actively conspiring to keep sex trafficking documents hidden from the public. This isn't a rumor. This isn't a conspiracy theory being pushed by anonymous accounts on social media. This is a real lawsuit, filed in a real court by real plaintiffs who have real standing. And the evidence they're bringing to bear is absolutely devastating.
We know that the Speaker of the House is trying to stop an effort to force the release of all of the documents. Are they going to change the course of this?
They could. They could. It depends on how members respond, both Democrat and Republican. There does seem to be some wellspring of support for these women among the Republican caucus, and there's full-throated support on the Democratic side, obviously. So it remains to be seen whether or not we respond. It is disappointing that Speaker Johnson is opposing the effort to bring the files public, and he's using the excuse that we're having these discussions and these women are having an opportunity to have their say, but we need the evidence, we need the files, and there needs to be a full, stem to stern review of this case.
At the center of this entire firestorm stands a woman named Adelita Grijalva. She's not a celebrity. She's not a longtime Washington insider. She's a newly elected Democratic representative from Arizona's 7th District who won her election decisively, saw her results certified by election officials, and should right now be walking the halls of Congress representing the people who sent her there. Except she's not, because Mike Johnson won't let her in. He won't administer the oath of office. He won't schedule the swearing-in ceremony. He won't recognize her as a member of the House. and his stated reason for this blockade is so flimsy, so transparently pretextual, that legal experts across the ideological spectrum are calling it what it is, a lie designed to buy time. Johnson claims the government shutdown has made it impossible to swear in new members. He says the House can't conduct normal business while the funding fight rages on. He says procedures must be followed, and the shutdown means those procedures are on hold. It sounds almost reasonable when you first hear it, the kind of bureaucratic explanation that makes people's eyes glaze over and move on to the next headline. But here's the problem. It's complete fiction. During the shutdown of 2013, new members were sworn in. During the shutdown of 2018, new members were sworn in. There is no rule, no statute, no precedent that prevents a member-elect from taking the oath of office during a funding lapse. The swearing-in ceremony takes minutes. It doesn't require appropriations. It doesn't require staff or resources beyond the most basic functions of the House. It requires exactly one thing, the Speaker scheduling it. And Mike Johnson refuses to do that. So if the official explanation is demonstrably false, the question becomes painfully obvious. What's the real reason? And that's where this story takes a turn into genuinely disturbing territory. Because Adelita Gava's vote, her single vote, would tip the balance in the House on one specific issue that has been simmering for months. Democrats and a handful of Republicans have been pushing a resolution that would force the full and complete release of every document related to Jeffrey Epstein's criminal enterprise. Every flight log, every client list, every photograph, every communication. The kind of comprehensive disclosure that would finally answer the questions that have been haunting this case since Epstein's suspicious death in a federal jail cell. The resolution has been stuck just a few votes short of passage. Nobody disputes this. The math is public. The whip counts have been reported. And Gava's arrival in Congress would provide the decisive margin. Her vote, combined with the existing coalition, would be enough to break through the resistance and mandate the release of documents that powerful people have spent years and untold resources trying to keep sealed. Mike Johnson knows this. Everyone in Washington knows this. And so Johnson is doing the only thing he can do to stop it. He's keeping Gava out. He's denying Arizona voters their representation because he's terrified of what their representative might vote for. The lawsuit filed against Johnson doesn't dance around these allegations. It states them plainly and forcefully. It accuses him of intentional disenfranchisement, a legal term that essentially means deliberately depriving citizens of their right to be represented in their government. It argues that his actions violate the constitutional rights of the voters in Arizona's 7th District, people who cast ballots, who participated in the democratic process, who did everything their country asked of them and are now being told that their voice doesn't matter because the Speaker has decided their representative's vote is inconvenient. The suit also makes a broader systemic argument that should concern everyone, regardless of how you feel about Epstein or the specific documents at issue. If the Speaker can simply refuse to swear in a duly elected member because he doesn't like how that member might vote, then the entire concept of representative democracy becomes optional. It becomes something that exists only when it's convenient for the people in power. Future speakers in future Congresses could use the same tactic. Don't like how a new member might vote on impeachment? Block their swearing in. Worried about a close vote on tax policy or healthcare or environmental regulation? Just keep the new member out until the vote passes. The precedent Johnson is trying to set would fundamentally transform Congress from a representative body into a private club where the leadership gets to decide who actually gets to participate. The backstory on Johnson and the Epstein files makes his current position even more damning, because he wasn't always on the side of secrecy. In fact, just months ago, he was singing a very different tune. Johnson gave public statements, on the record, to multiple news outlets, declaring his support for full transparency regarding the Epstein documents. He said the American people deserve to know the truth. He said he believed in accountability. He positioned himself, at least rhetorically, as someone who wanted those files released, who wanted justice for Epstein's victims, who wanted to expose the network of powerful enablers who made Epstein's crimes possible. People were surprised. Johnson had always been closely aligned with the MAGA wing of the Republican Party, and there had been persistent rumors that certain names in the Epstein files might be politically problematic for Trump allies. But Johnson seemed to be drawing a line. He seemed to be saying that transparency mattered more than political convenience. Democrats allowed themselves to feel a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, this could be one of those rare moments when both parties came together to do the right thing. Then, the moment for action actually arrived. A vote was scheduled. The resolution was ready. And Mike Johnson cut the House session short and sent everyone home. Politico reported on it. Rolling Stone covered it. The story was out there for anyone paying attention. Johnson's office offered a series of increasingly unconvincing explanations: scheduling conflicts, the need for additional review, procedural complications. None of them made sense. None of them explained why a man who claimed to support transparency was actively preventing a vote on transparency. The obvious inference was that someone had gotten to him, someone with enough influence to make him reverse course, someone whose name might be in those files. And now, with Grijalva's election threatening to force the vote he's been avoiding, Johnson has escalated from passive obstruction to active interference. He's not just delaying votes anymore, he's blocking an elected official from taking office. He's using the government shutdown as camouflage for a scheme that has nothing to do with government funding and everything to do with protecting secrets. The Democrats and activists who filed this lawsuit are betting that a federal judge will see through the pretext and order Johnson to swear Grijalva in immediately, allowing the Epstein vote to proceed. The legal basis for their argument is solid. The Constitution and federal law are clear about what happens when someone wins an election and their results are certified. They become the representative-elect. They have the right to be seated. The Speaker's role in this process is ministerial, not discretionary. He doesn't get to decide whether he feels like doing it. He doesn't get to impose extra constitutional conditions. He administers the oath because that's what the law requires. By refusing to perform this basic function, Johnson is arguably violating the Constitution he swore to uphold. The question is whether the courts will act with the urgency this situation demands. Federal litigation can drag on for months or years, and every day that passes without a ruling is another day Grijalva remains locked out of Congress. Another day the Epstein files remain sealed. Another day Johnson's gambit succeeds. The plaintiffs are pushing for expedited review, arguing that the ongoing disenfranchisement of Arizona voters constitutes irreparable harm that requires immediate judicial intervention. Whether a judge agrees to move that quickly remains to be seen. The political dimension of this is equally significant. Johnson has built his public identity around his Christian faith and his commitment to moral principles. He talks constantly about integrity, about family values, about protecting the vulnerable. And now he stands accused of using the powers of his office to shield individuals who may have participated in the sexual abuse of children. The hypocrisy would be stunning if it weren't so depressingly familiar. The same man who lectures America about morality is actively preventing the exposure of evidence that could bring child abusers to justice. The Epstein case occupies a unique position in the American consciousness. It's not just another scandal involving wealthy people doing unsavory things. Epstein trafficked teenage girls. He abused them himself, and he facilitated their abuse by other powerful men. The victims who have come forward have described experiences that are almost too horrific to contemplate. And the strong suspicion, supported by a considerable amount of publicly available evidence, is that Epstein didn't act alone. He had partners, he had clients, he had enablers. And those people have never been held accountable. They've continued to live their lives of wealth and privilege while their victims have been left to deal with trauma that will never fully heal. The documents that Johnson is working so hard to keep sealed could change that. They could identify who flew on Epstein's planes, who visited his properties, who participated in his crimes. They could provide the evidence needed to bring prosecutions that are long overdue. They could give victims the closure they've been denied for years. And Mike Johnson has decided that protecting whoever is named in those files is more important than any of that. More important than justice, more important than accountability, more important than the truth. The government shutdown that Johnson is using as his excuse deserves scrutiny in its own right. The shutdown is supposedly about budget disagreements between the parties. But as it drags on, more observers are beginning to suspect that the chaos and dysfunction serve purposes beyond whatever policy disputes are ostensibly at stake. A government in crisis mode is a government that can't exercise proper oversight. A Congress consumed with funding fights is a Congress that isn't holding hearings or issuing subpoenas or demanding accountability. The shutdown creates cover for all kinds of things that would normally face intense scrutiny. Blocking the release of Epstein documents is just one item on what might be a much longer list. Republicans have benefited enormously from the distraction the shutdown provides. While the media covers the latest negotiations and the public worries about government services, other stories that could damage the administration or its allies slip under the radar. The Epstein file vote was one of those stories. It was supposed to happen. It was supposed to be a moment of reckoning. And now it's been swallowed by the larger crisis, precisely as Johnson intended. The voters of Arizona's 7th District are the most immediate victims of this scheme. They participated in an election. They chose their representative. And now they have no voice in Congress because of a procedural maneuver that has no basis in law or precedent. Their interests are going unrepresented while Johnson plays out his strategy. The lawsuit seeks to vindicate their rights, but lawsuits take time, and the clock is running. Every day without representation is a day these citizens are being told that their participation in democracy doesn't count. There's an important question about who exactly Johnson is protecting. We don't know with certainty who appears in the sealed Epstein documents. That's the whole point of the fight over their release. But we can make reasonable inferences based on information already in the public domain. Epstein's social circle included former presidents, foreign royalty, technology billionaires, Hollywood executives, and major political donors. Some of these individuals have connections to both parties. Some have funded Republican campaigns and super PACs. Some have relationships with Trump and his inner circle. The universe of people who might have reason to fear the release of these documents is not small, and it crosses partisan lines. But right now, in this moment, the person blocking transparency is a Republican Speaker of the House. That's just an objective fact. Whatever Democrats may have done or not done in the past on this issue, the current obstruction is being carried out by Mike Johnson and the Republican leadership. They own this. They will be held accountable for it. And if the documents do eventually come out and reveal connections to Republican politicians or donors, the public will remember who tried to keep them hidden. The activists behind the lawsuit are framing this as a test case for democracy itself. If Johnson can get away with refusing to seat an elected representative because he doesn't like her likely votes, then the right to vote becomes conditional. It becomes something that exists only when the people in power permit it to exist. That's not how the system was designed to work. The Constitution doesn't give the Speaker a veto over election results. It doesn't allow him to disenfranchise entire districts because their choice of representative is politically inconvenient. These are principles that should unite Americans across the political spectrum. The right to representation isn't a partisan issue. It's the foundation of everything else. The moral dimension of this story is inescapable. Jeffrey Epstein's victims were children when the abuse began. They were girls, teenagers, vulnerable young people who were exploited by men with immense wealth and power. Those men, whoever they are, have so far escaped the consequences that would have fallen on anyone without their resources and connections. The sealed documents represent one of the last remaining avenues for accountability. If they're released, the victims might finally get some measure of justice. If they stay hidden, the perpetrators get away with it forever. And Mike Johnson has chosen to side with the perpetrators. There's no way to sugarcoat that. There's no way to spin it. The Speaker of the House is actively working to prevent the exposure of evidence that could implicate powerful people in the sexual abuse of minors. He's doing it during a government shutdown to minimize scrutiny. He's doing it despite having previously claimed to support transparency. And he's doing it by violating the constitutional rights of voters in Arizona. This is what corruption looks like. Not the cartoon version with bags of cash and secret meetings in parking garages, but the systemic kind where institutions are manipulated to protect the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. The path forward depends on several factors. The lawsuit needs to move through the courts with sufficient speed to matter. If it gets bogged down in procedural delays, Johnson wins by default. The shutdown needs to end at some point, though when that happens is anyone's guess. When it does end, Johnson loses his pretext, and the pressure to seat Grijalva will become overwhelming. At that point, he'll either have to comply or invent some new excuse, and each new excuse will be harder to sustain than the last. Public pressure also matters enormously. The Epstein case resonates with people in a way that many political scandals don't. The details are too horrifying, the injustice too blatant, the suspicion of elite impunity too strong. If enough voters express outrage at what Johnson is doing, if the political cost becomes high enough, even a speaker as apparently committed to obstruction as Johnson might calculate that his interests lie in cutting his losses. Public opinion can move politicians when nothing else will. There's also the possibility that the documents come out through other channels entirely. The sealed Epstein files are the subject of multiple legal battles in multiple jurisdictions. A judge somewhere else could order their release. A whistleblower could leak them. The estate litigation could produce disclosures that Johnson can't control. The walls around these documents are not impenetrable, and as more people fight for access, the chances of a breach increase. Johnson's efforts may ultimately prove futile. A desperate rearguard action that only succeeds in damaging his own reputation before the truth emerges anyway. What's happening right now is a stress test for American democracy. A Speaker of the House is blocking an elected representative from taking office. He's doing it to prevent a vote that would expose secrets powerful people want kept. He's using a government crisis as cover, and he's betting that the public won't pay enough attention to hold him accountable. Whether that bet pays off depends on what happens next. It depends on the courts, on the media, on the voters, on everyone who believes that democracy means something and that no one, no matter how powerful, should be above accountability. The Epstein files contain the truth about one of the worst criminal enterprises in modern history. The victims deserve to have that truth revealed. The public deserves to know who participated and who enabled it. And Mike Johnson has made himself the obstacle standing between the American people and those answers. The lawsuit is going to force him to explain himself in a court of law. His excuses are going to be tested under legal scrutiny. And if the truth is what his critics suspect, if this really is about protecting powerful people rather than following legitimate procedures, the consequences are going to be severe. This story is just beginning. The legal battle will unfold over the coming weeks. The political pressure will intensify. The shutdown will eventually end, and when it does, Johnson's cover disappears. At that moment, he'll have to decide whether to finally seat Grijalva and allow the Epstein vote to proceed, or to invent yet another reason why democracy has to wait while the secrets stay buried. His choice will tell us everything we need to know, and the American people will be watching.